I'm Gerard King from Salter & King Butchers in Aldeburgh.
So just where are we? What are we doing here?
We're looking at some cattle from the Yarnhill herd in Hampton, Suffolk, just on the River Alde. I'm picking out some bullocks for my shop.
Now, you've got the bullocks behind you, but we've also got a couple of older cows. Let's start with those. What makes you want to serve up to a 19-year-old cow in your shop? What's the benefit?
Well, the benefit is really for utilising those cattle that are a little bit older into the food chain for my customers to appreciate. But we came to an arrangement with Richard many years ago. I'd eaten old cow in Spain, old dairy cow in Spain, and I asked Richard 14 years ago when I started dealing with him if he could produce something similar but with his old cows here when they're making no longer any use for the herd. So he looked into it and he fattened them up a little bit, and it produced a really wonderful, delicious beef. I mean, it's still beef, it doesn't taste hugely different, but what you get is an extra layer of flavour. Texture's fantastic. The fat is a beautiful yellow, creamy yellow fat that you get that's from a cattle that's been grazed on the grass all its life. And I've known where it's been from when it was born right until it comes into my shop. And I can then portray that to my customers, I can explain the story to the customers, and they get something a bit special.
You've also been picking out something to go into your shop kind of pretty much immediately too. Just talk me through the process that you go through as a butcher to pick out which animal you want.
Well, I've tried to do this since we opened in Aldeburgh, is trying to go to visit the farm so I can really see how their animals are looked after, the kind of welfare, the kind of impact this farm and how they farm. And when I come to look at the bullocks here at Hampton, I'd love to do it more often. It's one of the best parts of the job, but obviously it's unrealistic to do it week in, week out when I'm buying cattle. But every now and again I'll come down and I'll pick out a nice bullock. And what I'm looking for is something that's not too fat, not too lean. I'll look at the brisket muscle between the two front legs. That gives me an indication of fat content. Look just either side of the tail at the back just to see. And that's kind of a nice long sirloin and a good shape. And I tend to choose slightly fattier animals because I believe they're going to hang better and longer. And also in the eating, its proof is in the eating, really. It's delicious.
And what are your thoughts on the role that animals like these play in biodiversity and nature recovery?
Well, we've got pasture here. I mean, I'm no expert, no farming expert, that's for sure. But the permanent pasture here, which locks in carbon, and the cattle there providing grazing on a wide variety of vegetation that's left to its own devices most of the year and then grazed and then moved around on that pasture, it has a very low impact, I believe.
And it's also about kind of localism, isn't it? About food miles and about really kind of knowing who grows your food and how it's grown and whether or not nature plays a part in that growing process.
Yeah, it's important, I think, because I'm very customer focused. I mean, my job as a small independent retailer is trying to hold on to my customers. And I think there's one particular word that does get bandied around a lot, and that's trust. And I trust Richard as a farmer that he's doing the right thing with his cattle and he's farming them in a way that I think is sustainable. He's a custodian of the land for his future generations, and so that trust filters to me, and then I can then pass on to the customer that I'm actually selling the meat that I'm talking about to the customer, rather than a lot of places can be a little bit, well, you know what I mean. So that trust is important for my customers, because you've got to look after your customers, and they're difficult to hold on to sometimes.
And what would you say to people that say, do you know what, we really shouldn't be eating meat, we're past that, they're too carbon intensive? What would you say to someone who really does believe that?
Well, there's an argument to say eat less meat. I think that's where we're going. I think that's a good thing. I've been saying, everyone says it nowadays, even butchers are saying it now. I've always said it, ever since working in my youth at my parents' business down in London, where it was pilot high, sell it cheap in those days in the 80s. Now, what we've done here in Suffolk, I've tried to set up, and my motto has been going right from the start, is don't eat it very often. But if you are going to have a bit of meat, then I think you should get it from somewhere you can trust and know that it's been farmed in a correct manner. And I think there is a future in farming for that sort of stuff.
Well, Gerard from Salter and King, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure.